What's up, basketball fans? Welcome to the Raptors Report. It is time to talk about the Toronto Raptors because after the Raptors waived PJ Tucker, they opened up a roster spot. Well, that roster spot is now filled, and we do have to talk about some additional news as well about certain 10-day guys being converted into other deals as well. So if you are ready to watch, make sure to hit the subscribe button. And with that being said, let's get into today's video. Now, there's no shout out for today's video because no one got the previous trivia question correct. LaMelo Ball was drafted in 2020, same draft class as Malachi Flynn. So no one answered that correctly. So no shout out for today's video. But Michael Grange was reporting that Orlando Robinson signed for the rest of the season and Jared Rhoden signs on a two-way deal. Raptors have one roster spot open. Now, of course, as I mentioned with Orlando, when I first did watch his highlights, there was something special to him. That's why I said the Raptors will likely give him a 10-day contract. Seems like he now has a roster spot for the rest of the season, which is good. But for someone like Orlando, I still want him to kind of clean up around the rim, especially when you're a center. You should be able to finish around the rim. You know, he's got limitations such as really missing those easy buckets at the rim, especially for someone like Orlando. You know, if he was able to shoot jump shots, if he was able to hit threes at a high percentage, it'd be a lot more understandable. But as a big center, he's done well defensively. He's rebounded well, and he protects the rim well because of his length. But just in terms of offensively, you need him to finish those baskets around the rim if he wants to continue to be a backup center for the Raptors in the near future. But again, he's able to hit those corner threes, which is a nice promising sign that maybe he can one day become a stretch big man and hit his threes at a high clip. Where in terms of Jared Rhoden, again, a two-way contract right after his 10-day. Not surprising, as I said there, he has a lot of unique ways of scoring on the offensive side. Now the part will be, getting him in our system and seeing what he can do for the rest of the season as well. But in terms of the players the Raptors have signed, let's talk about that. So Michael Scotto was reporting that the Raptors have agreed to a 10-day deal with Colin Castleton. League sources tell Hoops Hype. The 24-year-old center has been on a two-week player for the Lakers and Grizzlies. Now, of course, as always, anytime the Toronto Raptors do sign one of these unknown G League players or college players that didn't find a lot of minutes or time with certain teams, I always like to go through videos and highlights and see what they have been able to do, not only in the NBA, in the G League as well, and in the college, and kind of see how their game has progressed, right? How their game has changed as the talent becomes tougher, as the competition gets better as well. So again, we're going to be talking about the strengths and weaknesses. So let's start with his strengths here. And the one thing I find with him when I watch his highlights is that he is a good finisher around the rim. Now, of course, as a big man, you need to, especially how we talked about Orlando Robinson, you need to be able to finish around the rim. And again, in particularly his case here, we will go through his flaws later, but as someone who isn't a great shooter, just a heads up, he's not a great shooter. You want to be able to finish around the rim. So that's one of his strengths. He's also a pretty good, ball handler for a big man, can dribble well for a big man, and that's the luxury to have. I think as Raptors fans, we've been a little bit spoiled seeing Scotty Barnes, seeing Pascal Siakam, having all these, power forwards that can handle the ball pretty decently for this size. It kind of spoils you because you don't realize how rare it is to have that ability. But just even as a center, if they're able to dribble, and I will say this, I'm not just talking about, taking one or two dribbles. I've seen him full court, dribble the ball a lot better than even Jakob Poeltl, better than any center the Raptors have had in the last few years. So again, it's very impressive. Given the way the Raptors run their offense, it would be nice because you have multiple players that can bring up the ball, that can handle the ball, and then you're just not forcing a lot of turnovers either, which is good. He's also got a pretty good post-up game as well. Again, like I said, if you're a center that is not able to shoot all that well, the very least you should be able to do is score around the basket when you're a center. So his post game is actually pretty good. I like that about him. He's also a good rebounder as well. Again, you kind of need that in the NBA. Like if you're 6'9", 6'10 plus, and you're not able to rebound well, as a center, I mean, you better be hitting your threes really well because there's no excuse for you not to be rebounding the well. But thankfully for, the Raptors, he does rebound pretty well. And he sets good screens. This is such an underrated aspect of a lot of good centers around the NBA. Like, you see the way that Jakob Poeltl, for example, sets screens. It creates so much more space for guys like RJ Barrett, for Scotty Barnes, and just for anyone that's ready to attack the basket. It just gives them a lot more space as well. So for someone like Colin, it is good to have this asset to his arsenal, just given, again, I always talk about this, with the way that Darko runs the system, you're setting a lot of picks, you're moving the ball around. And for someone like Colin here, he's also great at just once he sets the pick, just finding and positioning himself well to kind of lay off of that defender just to kind of keep defenders on their feet, which is most important. You kind of keep defenders on their feet, then you're not sure if, Colin's going to attack the basket, if he's going to get that easy basket there as well. So that's definitely a great, tool to have in your arsenal. Now, speaking of something that is really hard to find for a lot of, G League players is their defense. He's actually a good shot blocker. So it's very impressive that, he averaged a lot of shots blocked in his college season as well. I think he had one season where he averaged 2.5 or 3 blocks per season, which is absolutely insane. One thing I will say he does really well when he's blocking shots is he's not the most athletic center. He's not going to come in there and, Giannis you or just come out of nowhere and block those massive shots. But one thing he does really well is he lets his defenders come into his body and then he'll use his arm to always contest shots, which is the most important thing. And he does get his hands on a lot of the balls as well when, the opposing team is trying to score that basket. So again, a really good skill set to have for a center, particularly for the Raptors as well. You always need shot blockers for a team that's not great defensively. So again, we're not obviously trying to compete for the playoffs. We're not trying to win, but it's always nice to have these kind of players with that kind of mindset. And when we talk about Darko's system, what is the one thing we need is passing. He's actually a pretty good passer for a big man as well. And similarly to how we talk about Jakob Poeltl, he can move the ball. Again, I think people need to set realistic expectations for when we talk about being a good passer for a center. I'm not saying he's going to average, Nikola Jokic assists or even average 5 assists a game, but just to be able to make the right passes as a big man is so key for today's NBA. Just the way that the league has trended. When you see a lot of the centers, like obviously besides Nikola Jokic, you see the Alperen Şengüns, you see your Domantas Sabonis, even Jonas Valanciunas, who's now playing with the Sacramento Kings, is just doing a good job of moving that ball. It makes it really difficult when you have a center that gets a double team and then just tosses it and forces a lot of turnovers, right? So to have someone like Colin that can make the passes, make the reads well, and just find the teammates, open teammates as well, it's a luxury to have. And lastly, and most importantly, he can hit his free throws at a pretty decent rate. One thing I've always talked about having centers on your NBA roster that makes it so challenging to play them in late game situations is they need to be able to hit their free throws really well, because we've seen it time and time again where too many opposing teams will constantly keep fouling the center, because we've seen it with Jakob Poeltl, where he can't hit his free throws or he misses one or he misses both. Then it causes a lot of issues in terms of, you can be up 5 points, but if your center keeps getting fouled and missing those free throws, then it kind of hurts your team a lot as well. But these are some of the strengths for Colin Castleton. Let's talk about some of the weaknesses as well. Now, one thing I've noticed with Colin is he's quite slow-footed. He's not the fastest of players at the center position, which again kind of limits in terms of, when we talk about defense, you don't want him guarding guys on the perimeter. We've seen it time and time again. We've seen some really good defensive centers too, mind you, on the perimeter that just get blown by. So again, for someone like Colin, it's probably not a great idea to have him really out there in the 3-point line or even too far away from the paint, because he's not the quickest on his feet. He really isn't. He also has limited athleticism. As I talked about earlier, he's not someone that's going to wow you with his shot blocking ability in terms of how he's able to do certain things. He's not going to be jumping, like crazy and blocking those massive shots that make the highlight reel. He does have limited athleticism. I will say one thing though, when we talk about limited athleticism, that doesn't mean he can't jump at all. He's still someone that can go in for some big dunks, and I will touch upon this in just a minute when I give you a NBA player comparison to him. But he's mostly just finishing around the rim with layups, similarly to Jakob Poeltl. He can definitely soar in for some nice dunks, but that's not really the best part of his game. The one thing I will say about Colin is he needs to get physically stronger. So when you talk about a lot of younger players, he's about to be 25 in a few months. He's 24 and a half years old, I believe. But in terms of Colin, one thing he does need to get is a lot stronger. When you're coming in as a G League player, when you're coming in as a college player, you need to be physically a lot stronger, because now you're all of a sudden you're going up against guys that are 260 pounds, 270 pounds, a lot heavier, a lot stronger as well. So again, it would be different if he was 18, 19, 20 years old. Then you can make the argument that he kind of needs to fill in his body as he gets older. But he's kind of reaching that age where you're pretty much stopped growing. You need to get a lot stronger, and just you want to be able to bang in the paint, as a center as well. And lastly, his weakness is increase his shooting range. So he has been attempting to kind of add the 3-point shot to his arsenal based on his G League stats. But just overall, what you want to see from him is, again, he's good in the post. But then just given the way the NBA has run in the last few years, you want your centers to be able to hit some sort of threes as well. And if he's able to add that consistently to his game, do not be surprised if he finds himself in the NBA, and finds a good team that will give him some quality minutes as well. So what do you think about this as well? Again, I'm going to give you a player comparison. What do you think about Colin Castleton based on some of the strengths and weaknesses? I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. And let's talk about his player comparison and kind of just highlight and summarize his strengths and weaknesses one more time before we head to our trivia question. So when I watched Colin Castleton, his game in some ways reminded me a lot of a Jakob Poeltl, but then I pinpointed to exactly who he reminded me a lot of, and that was Alperen Şengün. Now, of course, whenever we make player comparisons, NBA player comparisons, obviously do keep in mind that he's obviously not at the level of Alperen Şengün. If he was, he would have been on a team already, and we wouldn't have been able to sign him to a 10-day contract. But in terms of physicality, you look at someone like Alperen Şengün, he's not the most physical player. He's not someone, he can do a lot of things in terms of passing, scoring, but similarly, when we talk about skill sets, Alperen Şengün isn't a great three-point shooter. He's not a good jump shooter as well. He mostly works around the paint. He's someone that can, he can definitely dunk the ball. It's not as if he can't. But similarly with Colin, he can mostly just finishes around the rim and layups. And there's so many more similarities between these guys in terms of passing, in terms of shot blocking ability as well. And the one thing I will say in terms of Colin is his block shots have gone down as he's increased his competition from college to G League to the NBA as well, because now it's so much more different. You can't just let players kind of come into your body and trying to contest them because now they're stronger. They're a lot more athletic as well. So again, there's a lot of similarities that I find with Alperen and Colin as well. Again, we'll see. I'm not gonna label Colin as a hidden gem. I'm not gonna say he's an under the radar signing. If he gets a 10-day contract, I'm not gonna sit here and act like I'm gonna hype him up. I'd be really surprised if he does get a second 10-day. But the NBA is all about opportunity. So if he finds the right opportunity, if he finds himself getting enough minutes, maybe he's playing against the opposing teams, particularly a team that we're playing on Friday in Utah Jazz's bench players, G League players. Maybe he puts up a good stat line. So it's all about opportunity. It's all about minutes. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a 10-day contract. But let's see where it goes. I'm playing this very cautiously with Colin. It's kind of let's see how he plays, and then we'll talk about him more, right? But I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And as always, I do have a trivia question for you today. And the trivia question is, where did Colin Castleton play college basketball? Was it A, Texas? Was it B, Auburn? Was it C, Florida? Or was it D, Alabama? So whoever answers this trivia question correctly first in the comment section gets a shout out in my next video. So that will be it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have yourselves a great day.